Hello, everybody. This is Steve Keller. Obviously, if you're on Facebook Live, I may grab the video later and use it for some other purposes. But currently, I just want to have a conversation this evening about Christians and quantum physics, exploring a Christ-centered energy healing. And a little bit of my background is I am currently a certified emotion code and body code practitioner. And so I do that. I've got clients all over the world who I take care of with that, many of whom are Christians themselves, many of whom are not. Doesn't matter to me. I work with everybody. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of my background and my understanding of how how I integrate my Christian faith with quantum physics and energy healing. I get a lot of questions about this, and I'm kind of like the go-to guy for energy healing if you're looking for someone who's a little more biblically based to do this for you. So a little bit of my background. Really, I first became very interested in healing and everything because of what my mom went through. My mom, when I was young, was diagnosed with breast, lymphatic, and uterine cancer. And she was told by her doctor, if you don't do exactly what I tell you to do, you'll be dead in 6 months. And my mom actually didn't do anything the doctor told her to do. First she prayed, and she's like, okay, God, what do I do, for my situation? And she did kind of two things. So one, she got very aggressive nutritionally, and on the other hand, she got very aggressive in terms of building her faith and believing God for a miracle. And my mom didn't actually tell anyone that she had cancer except my father, not me, not my two sisters, nobody. She goes, I don't need help from anybody else telling me that I'm going to die, which was a good move on her part. What eventually happened, though, is she was at a prayer meeting, and the guy leading the prayer meeting walked up to her and said, hey, you didn't tell me you had cancer. He said, while we were sitting here praying, I saw an angel come and take something out of your body. So most of my life, I've been very open to healing and to the supernatural and to stuff like that. I graduated from UC Davis with a degree in international economics and business German, and then I went to a Bible school in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this Bible school was well known internationally for teaching people faith and healing and all that. And we'd have people from all over the world come there with desperate physical situations, trying to get them resolved. So later, I had businesses in marketing nutritional supplements. I've been doing that for about 22 years. And about 10 years ago, one of my mentors, who had, she's been on probably 1,000 Christian TV and radio shows, very well-known practitioner, taught me how to do muscle testing. So the first thing I want to talk a bit about is kind of what is muscle testing. And, one of the ways I view muscle testing is just a yes or no response from your physical body if something is true or false. And a lot of times people use it for testing for nutritional supplements. My view as a Christian on muscle testing is that, I've got a beautiful car, a beautiful Lexus. If the car has a problem, the check engine light comes on. I don't actually have to dismantle the entire car to figure out what's wrong with it. Built into the design of the car, I can plug a computer into it, and the computer will spit out codes, and I read those codes, and I can very easily figure out what's wrong with it. And certainly, as much as I love my Lexus, I feel God designed my physical body to be better designed than Lexus. So if something's wrong with my physical body, I believe there's a lot of built-in diagnostic tools in my physical body that you can tap into. And I'm like, they work very well. So muscle testing is one of those. You can see people who are very good at iridology, really reading, looking into your eyes and tracking down different things. You can use foot reflexology, all sorts of different things. But muscle testing is one of those, and it's just a yes or no response from your body. And a little bit about kind of quantum physics and muscle testing is this. Science now knows that we live in a world run on quantum physics, okay? And basically that means Everything is energy, and everything is connected. And from my perspective, if I feel that God designed me to in His image to rule and reign in this life, what I would view is that certainly my physical body must have been designed to tap into and to dominate in a world run on quantum physics. And that's certainly what I've experienced in the last 10 years doing this type of work. So this, when we look at muscle testing, the way I would describe it is, muscle testing is just a yes or no response, okay? When something is true for you, your physical body gives a response that something that's true makes you physically stronger and gives your muscles more integrity, and when something's false, it makes you weaker and you lose integrity. One simple way to test that, and there's many different ways to muscle test, is using your tongue, and I've showed this to people before. If you just flip your tongue back and forth very easily inside your mouth, left to right, right? And then you make a statement you know is true. So you see what it feels like to make a true statement, which would be, my name is Stephen, and I just do that with my tongue. Or I simply and then I compare it to a false statement. My name is Rick, and I do that again. And it's not nearly as easy. So that's just one simple way to do muscle testing. Doing proxy muscle testing is a little different, and I'll tell you first some of my experiences before we go into proxy muscle testing, which is kind of takes things to the next level. There is a scripture in 3 John 1 verse 2 which says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers." So the first thing to understand is that you are a spirit, you have a soul, compromising your mind, your will, your intellect, your emotions, and you live in a physical body. And your spirit and your soul can't be separated, but they can be divided for the means of study and understanding. And so your emotions play a big part in your physical health. And so when we use things like the emotion code and different things to track down and rewire and reset your emotional health, it is a very important biblical principle to bring physical health to you and even prosperity in your life as well. So one of my experiences was I learned how to do muscle testing. Then was given a book called The Emotion Code, where you use muscle testing to track down trapped emotional issues. And think of them like blown emotional fuses. So the way you do that is, if you're just using a yes or no response, you make a statement, okay, the way I'm feeling is caused by a trapped emotion, yes or no. This trapped emotion is on the left-hand side of the document, yes or no, is on the right-hand side of the document. And so using this binary approach, you can get very accurate. And by the way, it's how everything digitally that you're looking at is run on the same thing. It's zeros and ones. So it's like open and closed circuits is how we experience technology. And similarly, that's the same way that muscle testing works. So one of my first experiences was I was with a bunch of friends of mine in Hawaii, and one of my friends was dealing with a very serious health challenge. And I said, hey, he was in his 60s, and I said, hey, let me do this process for you because there's a lot of emotional stuff going on when you're dealing with major health issues. And he's like, absolutely, let's do that. So using this process, I said, okay, I think you're dealing with a heart wall of overwhelm at age 23 in the fall. So that's 4 data points, and if you look at how many options are on each data points, statistically that's about a 1 in 28,800 chance of me just simply guessing that correctly, okay? But I said to him, I'm like, anything come to mind, or am I just making stuff up? And his response was, well, no, you're completely accurate. He goes, at age 23 in the fall, I was working for a certain 3-letter government agency and was in a foreign country and killed someone for the first time. And you're completely accurate. It was very overwhelming for me. And I'm like, well, here we are 40 years later, it's still one of the primary issues you're dealing with in your physical body. And when I reset that for him, it made such a huge impact on him that he and his wife started sending me referrals, right? And what I thought to myself as I'm like, if I'm going to work with people, I'd really like to know how effective this is, and I need someone with some major issues to practice on, okay? That's kind of the way I think. I love puzzles, right? So at the time, I was working with a young woman who related to me that she was absolutely terrified of spending any time by herself. And I'm like, hey, perfect. How about you come over to my house and let me practice on you? And she was like, sure, sounds good. So she came over and I asked her, I go, 0 to 10, how bad are we talking about here? And she looked at me with a blank stare in her face and she goes, it's a 30. And I'm like, okay. Now, at work, everyone had told me, oh, she's lesbian. And honestly, I don't really care that much about it. But one of the very interesting things she told me is she says, I wasn't born that way, i.e. a lesbian, but I don't ever have to spend any time by myself. In other words, she has chosen specifically, she told me, I've chosen this lifestyle because I can't handle being alone. And what I did for her over the course of 45 minutes is I would identify a specific issue. She would tell me what it is, and we would reset it for her. And you use that using a strong magnet down your central meridian. And so the first thing I identified for her, she said, okay, that's the second time I try to kill myself with drugs, right? The second thing I identified for her, she said, well, that would be the first time I tried to kill myself with drugs. I'm like, okay. The third thing I identified for her, she said, well, that's at 9 years old. That's the first time I got kicked out of my house. I'm like, okay, that's a little crazy. The fourth thing I identified for her, she said, well, what's this thing at 12 years old? She goes, well, that's the second time I get kicked out of my house. And at 12 years old, I actually thought I was on my own. So after I had reset all those things for her, I asked her again, I'm like, how are you doing now? And she goes, I'm about it too. And it's very strange, she never changed her countenance, her expression this whole time. And I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, I think we're having a failure to communicate, right? And I said, well, if you're home alone one night and the power goes out, what are you going to do? And she said, she goes, I might have to call someone. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's pretty good. So every time I would see her after work, I would ask her, I go, how are you doing now? And she's like, well, I like spending time by myself now, thank you. Now, I will comment on that, on what she was experiencing. There are many Christians who would go, oh, it's like this spiritual thing she's dealing with. We have to deal with that. And it wasn't. It was no spiritual warfare, weird spiritual things that we had to work through. It was all just blown emotional fuses that had caused her to behave in a certain way. So one of, in talking about muscle testing, one of my other favorite scriptures about this is Hebrews 5:14. And I'm going to read it. I forget what translation this is from, but hopefully this will be interesting for you. It says, Hebrews 5:14 says, for those whose senses and mental faculties are trained by practice to discriminate and distinguish between what is morally good and noble and what is evil and contrary either to divine or human law. Very interesting. So what it's talking about is you can train yourself to know good and evil, right or wrong. And so really that's a lot of what muscle testing is. So one of the other things we deal a lot with in terms of doing muscle testing that is a little bit outside people's box is you doing muscle testing by proxy. And by proxy, that means we're muscle testing people on their behalf over the phone or over the internet. In other words, you're not actually in their presence. And this is probably one of the things, I will say this first. Unfortunately, often the church, not everyone in the church, but certain aspects of the church tend to take anything that they don't completely understand and put it in a box. And if they don't understand it and it looks weird, often it's put into an occult box or a quote-unquote new age box, when in fact that might not be that at all. And so when we're doing muscle testing in person and by proxy over long distance, you're just talking about quantum physics. And so quantum physics, again, the understanding is that everything is energy and everything is connected. A more scientific term for that would be non-locality. And non-locality means that things that aren't in the same location appear to be able to impact each other, even though they don't appear to be connected, and it happens at the exact same time. Albert Einstein called what he observed in this area, he called it spooky action at a distance. Often you see maybe many religions and spirituality have understood this for a long time, and what a more spiritual term for this would be non-duality. In other words, that everything is connected. And again, this isn't doing this for someone over the phone is not a spiritual practice. It's simply a tool. Now, what I will say is that you can take any tool and use it for something for good. You can also use it for evil. And you can do anything in the natural and ask God to anoint it and help you do it better. And similarly, you can take any tool and you can anoint it with a good spirit or a bad spirit. And so certainly there are aspects of quote-unquote energy healing which can get a little weird at sometimes, and you absolutely need to be cautious when you're dealing with things like this, that you don't get connected to something that you don't want to be connected to. If you want to delve into that a little further, an excellent book to read is called, it's by Johanna Michelson. She wrote 2 books called The Brighter Side of Evil, and also a book called Like Lambs to the Slaughter. And she had very interesting experiences of working in Mexico for a psychic surgeon and seeing crazy miracles. But when she went back and researched all these people who had gone to this psychic surgeon, who what she found is all of those people, they had either become drug addicts, alcoholics, or just crazy stuff. It appeared that a lot of these people paid a very high price for using that modality. So, but what I suggest people do is that too often people, and Christians especially, are so worried about being deceived or different things like that. And my suggestion to you is to express more faith in God's ability to keep you on truth rather than things deceiving you, if that makes sense. So, so one of the other very interesting things that you can do with doing muscle testing and emotion code work, and especially body code work, is in the body code there are many different. It's a system developed by Dr. Brad Nelson, and in it there are many different categories where you're testing for someone's primary imbalance regarding certain issues. And there are actually some spiritual issues in there which can sometimes be super interesting. And although not very, very common, sometimes when these spiritual issues come up, they are crazy accurate. And I'm going to give you a very interesting example. I was working with this woman who's about 70, and she had a lot of trauma in her life. And one day I'm working with her, and I'm using the body code where it's like, okay, is the issue over here, over there, it's over here, it's this age. So you get a lot of details on it. And I came up with something that seemed really specific and very outside the box. And I honestly, I didn't think it was correct, but I tossed it out there. And I'm like, okay, here's the deal. I think that a disembodied spirit cursed you through your sister when you were 7 years old. Now, that's very specific and very outside the box. And she immediately said to me, she goes, "You're 100% accurate." And I'm like, I was totally surprised that she immediately said that. And I'm like, okay, what are you talking about? What happened to you at 7 that you would think that that would be so accurate? And she says, oh, I remember it very clearly. She goes, it was the night before my Catholic confirmation. And for some bizarre reason, my sister spewed the most nasty, hateful things to me, like telling me, you're going to hell and all these crazy things. And I'm like, whoa, that's trippy. I go, yeah, I really think your sister got hijacked spiritually to curse you in that manner. So that's just one example. Another very helpful thing is to when you can get more accuracy on how you're feeling about a certain situation. For example, people will talk a lot about pride, how it's such a dangerous thing. And I've done work on people for 10 years, worked with many people on all sorts of issues. And never once has the emotion of pride come up the way people typically think it is or the way it should come up. Most people think when you say pride that it's like, oh, I'm so wonderful and perfect and all that. And never once has that come up as an issue. What does come up sometimes is when people, the type of pride that comes up is elevating the level of your problem above a certain solution, or elevating how much of a victim you are, right? A very extreme example of that is I was working with one young woman who expressed to me that she dealt with unending guilt and shame and asked me to help her. And in doing testing, I described a certain type of issue. When I said the age of 21, she went like totally pale, scared, like, I don't want to talk about what you just landed on. And I asked her, I go, we don't have to talk about this. We can just deal energetically with the issue. She's like, can we do that? I go, absolutely. But one thing we did is I muscle tested, how are you feeling about this situation? And the emotion of pride came up. And this is back when I hadn't done much work, and I thought, that's weird. Why would pride come up? And I played around with it until I came up with this statement. And the statement was, I'm so messed up that not even God can help me. And it was energetically absolutely true for her. And it's like, okay, wow, that is some seriously nasty pride, because you're separating yourself from God's ability to heal you. So another very interesting thing that you can do is, the Bible talks about that God's kingdom, or God's way of doing and being, is 3 things. It's righteousness, peace, and joy. And so a lot of times what happens is people come to me and they want more peace and joy in their life. But really more peace and joy comes from getting very grounded in, my definition of righteousness would be the ability to stand before God without any guilt or shame, because you understand that your relationship with God is based entirely on His unqualified and unconditional love for you. And one of the things I do a lot of work with is using a document called the Map of Consciousness by a gentleman named Dr. David Hawkins. And this map of consciousness is divided into a top half and a bottom half. And it's from a book called Power versus Force. And by the way, I personally don't agree theologically with everything David Hawkins says, but I find some stuff fascinating and very useful. And, one of my mentors taught me, he goes, you need to learn how to eat the hay and spit out the sticks. Okay. I go to many churches where I don't agree with everything that's preached from the pulpit. It doesn't mean I get up and walk out. I go, well, what do I agree with? So this map of consciousness is, it's divided into a bottom half, which is in force, or a top half, which is in power, which are 2 different ways you can go through life. Okay. And when you're operating in force, you require a lot of outside energy to validate your identity. Okay, so if I'm very much in force, I'm dependent on, for example, my personal performance or lack thereof tells me what I'm worth. Okay, so you find people who are very, very driven, go, 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 go. Sometimes they're so driven because their very identity and value is connected to their performance, and you can't let up or can't quit, because you'd be worth nothing then. So your own performance. Secondly, from the outside, is how people treat you, what they say or don't say to you, how they treat you. You look to other people to value you. The third area is from institutions. So institutions like organizations or churches or whatever, are they accepting me? Are they validating me? Are they promoting me? Are they telling me I'm worth something? And so when you're in force and you tend to push on things, and things push back against you, and it can be very exhausting. Or when you're in power, you're not dependent on outside energy, okay, because you're very confident and settled in the fact that your worth is not tenuous, or it doesn't change. Your worth is very much rested, from my perspective, on God's unconditional love for you. And when you don't need outside energy or validation, what it does for you is you can move forward in life based on what's best for other people, because you don't have to worry about yourself, okay? And the other thing it allows you to do is, when you're in force, you're very much, you're worried about being more efficient. How much can I get done? And when you're in power, you can rest more, and you can worry about, okay, let's make sure we do the right things, okay? Now, Dr. Hawkins doesn't talk about this, but from my perspective, one of the things we do using Christ-centered energy healing is we look at this map and we understand that it also describes the two different ways you can relate to God. Some people in their relationship with God have the mindset and mentality of a slave or servant, and if I have the mindset and mentality of a slave or servant, when I wake up in the morning, I don't know what I'm going to be worth that day, okay? Other people, organizations, have authority over me. I hope I perform well, so I don't get beaten or punished, right? And it's a very exhausting place. Versus when you have the mentality and power, which is more the mentality and mindset of a child of God, okay, where your relationship with your Father is dependent on His love for you, and it's not a tenuous or conditional thing, you understand? And one analogy I give often, many people I'm working with are women, and I go, okay, you have to understand that if you understand you are the princess, that you are the king's favorite daughter, and you look at your life through that perspective, it changes everything, okay? The princess doesn't wake up in the morning worried about what she's worth. She's not a people pleaser, okay? she's not worried about that. She can be incredibly generous and helpful and giving, but she doesn't allow other people to run her life or dictate her schedule, okay? And there isn't anyone or any institution in the kingdom who has authority over and can deny her, right? Because in Ephesians it says that you've been predestined to good works. So if God has predestined you to good works, and nothing can separate you from God's love, okay, then your poor performance can't impact what you're supposed to do with your life. It doesn't disqualify you. You can always refocus on it. And no person or institution can deny you that, because they simply don't have the authority to do that. So that's a lot of examples on that. Anyone currently watching have any questions for me as I look over some notes? But I think we covered quite a bit. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Anyways, if you do have any questions, just put them in the notes. I will also include a link to a specific page on my website which details a little bit of this out and includes a few more scriptures in there. And I appreciate everyone watching. Hi, Patty. Nice to see you. Gersh, thank you for watching. Pamela Bank, appreciate you, Pam. Hope everything's going well. Jen Verdery, Mr. David Raymond. Awesome. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. And if you have any questions on this, or would like to explore doing some coaching with me, feel free to contact me. The thing I'll leave you with is this, is what happens for many people is they have a certain understanding of what life could be like, or a certain understanding of spiritual principles. And they realize, I understand this mentally, but I am not connected to it. It's not working. And you read a ton of books and listen to piles of teaching on different things, which are very broad, but you're like, I still don't know where I'm disconnected. And one of the great things about doing muscle testing and in this manner is you can get super accurate on exactly where you got disconnected from God's kingdom and from His love. And when you're very specific, you can shift things very quickly, and then you can reconnect to the way life can actually be. So I appreciate you all, and look forward to chatting with some of you. Thanks.